My name was Idris. I was an Imam in a vibrant, multicultural London mosque. Respected, deeply rooted in tradition, and yet inside me, an unsettling emptiness brewed, an unquenchable thirst for something more. My Fridays were filled with reverent prayers, the hum of devotion vibrating through the air. Yet in those moments, I felt an imminent crisis simmering beneath the surface. As I stood before my congregation, embodying the ideal of faith, I questioned, was I truly serving God, or was I merely upholding a system that oppressed the very spirit of my yearning? Then, one fateful day, amidst the echoes of prayer, a rush of darkness overwhelmed me. I collapsed, entering a realm beyond anything I thought possible. In the vastness of a desolate desert, a radiant light pierced through my fears, and there I encountered Jesus. His presence was unlike any doctrine I had ever known. It was a revelation piercing through the shadows of my faith, exposing the chains that had held me captive. I was shown a spiritual war, unseen to the naked eye. A battle for truth that extends far beyond our understanding. What I learned shook me to my core. The structures we put our faith in often stifle true spirituality. In that blinding light, Jesus called my name, urging me to break free from the shackles of a fearful obedience. It was in this moment of unveiling that the whispers of doubt transformed into a deafening roar, urging me to confront the reality of my existence. Returning to my life was a journey fraught with turbulence. The fallout was immediate, with my community labeling me a heretic and my family turning their backs on me. They could not fathom the metamorphosis that had taken hold within me, a transition birthed from the desperate need to embrace a startling truth. The spiritual liberation I experienced was overshadowed by fear of rejection, a paradox that echoed the struggles faced by many seeking true freedom. As I grappled with the fear of loss, a spark ignited within me. The realization that my experience was not solely for personal solace, but a divine commission to share my truth. There are countless souls yearning to hear the freedom I found in Jesus, no matter the cost. I stand here today, ready to embrace my new calling, daring to defy the shadows that threaten to silence me. In this video, I will take you deeper into the life-altering truths revealed to me, the truths that could change everything for those willing to listen. Prepare yourself for a journey of transformation. Before we begin, I invite you to share in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is there. This truth must reach across borders. And if your heart resonates with Jesus, subscribe to Truth from Beyond. Join me in unveiling the next layer of this extraordinary revelation, because together we can ignite a movement of awakening. In the heart of London, within the walls of a traditional mosque, I was accustomed to the rhythm of Friday prayers, the familiar recitations, the resonance of unity, and the weight of spiritual conformity that filled the air. As an Imam, I had dedicated my life to guiding my community through the teachings of Islam, advocating for peace and understanding in a world teetering on the brink of discord. Yet beneath that veneer of devotion, an unsettling tension simmered. I felt a conflict stirring deep within, an incongruity between my beliefs and the rigidity imposed by religious authority. It was an unsettling truth, one that I had learned to navigate carefully, but little did I know how profoundly my world was about to shift. The day of the revelation started like any other, but it was punctuated by a sense of foreboding. As I began the service, I felt a surge of energy washing over me, compelling me to share more than just the prescribed sermons. In that moment, a vision enveloped me as I prayed, and suddenly, I was no longer in the mosque. I found myself in a blinding light, face to face with Jesus. His presence radiated love and understanding, yet also urgency. He spoke to me about the hidden agendas that govern our lives, how the elite manipulate faith, using it as a tool to control rather than nurture. The revelation was overwhelming, cutting through the layers of doctrine I had relied on for so long. Here was the truth I had been searching for, lifted from the confines of dogma and illuminated in a way that shattered my previous understanding. In that sacred space, Jesus unveiled the spiritual war that rages all around us. I witnessed how the very structures we cling to often perpetuate injustice and division. Politicians, religious leaders, and media all puppeteered by agendas designed to maintain power, fueling conflict instead of fostering unity. I watched scenes unfold, wars driven by greed and fear, families divided by the dogmas they held sacred. I felt the weight of humanity's pain. It was a chaotic symphony of suffering, resulting from the deception that had been peddled under the guise of righteousness. I understood then that this encounter was as much a blessing as it was a calling. It implored me to embrace the risk of challenging the very system I was part of. When I returned to the mosque, the sensation of Jesus' presence lingered, electrifying my spirit and igniting a fire in my heart. I was terrified yet exhilarated at the prospect of sharing this truth, a truth that I knew would not be easily accepted. The fear of repercussions loomed large, but the conviction in my soul was stronger. What if my community rejected me? What if I was deemed a heretic or worse? Yet the reality of the spiritual war demanded action. I saw the necessity of awakening those around me, helping them recognize the layers of deception they were entangled in. The urgency to guide my congregation toward true enlightenment consumed me. That day, I stepped onto the pulpit with a profound determination. My sermon transformed into a passionate plea, weaving together the lessons of love taught by Jesus and the need for us to rise against the forces that sought to divide us. I spoke of empathy, of reaching beyond our own experiences to embrace the stories of others. I urged them to seek out those uncomfortable truths hidden beneath the surface of our beliefs. In every word, I poured my heart, hoping to spark the kind of awakening that had forever altered the course of my life. The tension in the room was palpable as my message hung in the air. Would they hear me, or would fear shroud their hearts? As I looked out at the faces before me, I felt a mixture of trepidation and hope. Some listened with rapt attention while others exchanged furtive glances, their unease evident. I recognized that challenging the status quo was inherently dangerous, especially in a community steeped in tradition and expectation. But deep inside, I believed that the truth, once spoken, has the power to penetrate the walls of conformity. I yearned for my congregation to join the fight against the hidden agendas that orchestrated so much suffering. My heart was heavy with the knowledge that this movement for truth was essential not just for our community, but for the world at large. The path to awakening was steep, but the necessity of taking that path could no longer be ignored. As I stood before my congregation in that traditional mosque in London, projecting an air of calm and authority, deep down, I was wrestling with a profound emptiness. Those moments of devotion, filled with recitations and communal prayers, had begun to feel hollow. Despite my titles and accolades as an imam, there was a growing yearning in my heart that contradicted my steadfast adherence to Islamic doctrines. I felt the weight of expectation press down on me, expectations from my community, my family, and even myself. I had always asked others to embrace their faith, but I was increasingly aware that my own faith was being challenged by doubts I couldn't ignore. It was an alarming realization, one that pierced through the surface of my seemingly stable life. One unexpected evening, after a particularly intense day filled with rituals and prayers, I found myself alone in my room, grappling with my heart's discontent. The stillness of the night pressed in on me like an oppressive blanket, amplifying the turmoil within. I closed my eyes in search of peace, surrendering to the silence that enveloped me, but instead of calm, something far more powerful began to unfold. I was transported into another realm, a realm filled with light and a love unlike anything I had ever known, and there, standing before me, was Jesus. He radiated an aura of compassion that pierced the depths of my spirit, illuminating the shadows of doubt that had weighed me down for so long. In that holy encounter, Jesus revealed profound truths about the spiritual war that raged within and around us. I witnessed a tapestry of deception woven into the fabric of society, orchestrated by the elite, whose hidden agendas dictated our lives. It was as if a veil had been lifted, and I could see the manipulation that fueled divisions among people, be it through socioeconomic disparity or religious conflict. There were images of leaders exploiting fears, stirring up animosity to maintain control while suppressing the voices of those seeking unity and truth. I watched as communities were fractured, families turned against each other, caught in a web spun from fear, ignorance, and power. An overwhelming sense of urgency filled me as I grasped the necessity of awakening not only myself but those around me. When I returned to my reality, the gravity of that revelation weighed heavily on my conscience. The calmness I projected as an imam was now overshadowed by the realization that I had been part of a system that often perpetuated ignorance instead of enlightenment. What weighed on me most was the thought that my community, bound by tradition and doctrine, could be ensnared in this deception. I could no longer stand idly by, confined within the walls of conformity. I had seen the truth, felt it in the depths of my soul, and it beckoned me to share it. But how could I confront the very establishment I had dedicated my life to serve? The fear of losing everything I had built, a life anchored in respect and authority, began to gnaw at my resolve. Every prayer thereafter felt imbued with a new layer of tension. I could no longer recite words without questioning their implications. I began to gather the courage to express my thoughts, sharing my experiences with a few trusted friends who I sensed were also seeking something more. As I spoke of the revelation and the spiritual war we face, I felt a mix of liberation and fear. Would they understand? Would I be seen as a heretic, challenging the very foundations we leaned on? Still, there was an undeniable pull to confront the hidden agendas that governed our lives. The powerful messages of awakening and unity that Jesus conveyed during that divine encounter continued to resonate, echoing the urgent need for change. The weeks turned into months, and with every passing day my internal struggle intensified. I felt torn between my commitment to my faith and the newfound truths I had encountered. It was as if I was standing at a crossroads, one path leading towards adherence to traditional beliefs, and the other toward an awakening that held the promise of liberation. The implications of what I had learned about the manipulation of faith and the spiritual war we are engaged in loomed large. I desired to empower others to break free from the chains built on deception and divisiveness. As I prepared to share my journey more openly, I knew that the confrontation would not only challenge the beliefs of those around me, but would also demand that I face my deepest fears: fear of rejection, fear of losing my community, and ultimately, fear of losing myself. The truth was calling, and I felt driven to answer, even as the uncertainty of the path ahead loomed like shadows cast by a flickering flame. As I stood in front of my congregation during Friday prayers, the familiar routines of worship, recitations, the rhythm of prayers washed over me. But in that sacred moment, a profound void began to creep into my heart. While everyone around me was deeply engrossed in their practices, I felt a disconnect that unsettled my spirit. It wasn't just a fleeting thought. It was a gnawing realization that something was amiss in my life and faith. As the words flowed from my lips, speaking of guidance and grace, I found myself grappling with silent questions about the very system I had always followed. Was this truly the path of truth, or had I been swept up in a narrative crafted by a hidden agenda? Outside the mosque, life continued with the same rhythm. Yet, I noticed subtle changes in my dreams during those nights that followed. I was transported to realms filled with light and fragments of wisdom that pierced through my mind. In these dreams, Jesus appeared not as a distant figure in religious texts, but as a compassionate presence confronting me with revelations. He had a message that shook the very foundation of my understanding. The dreams carried weight, revealing truths I had long buried under layers of doctrinal conditioning. Each night I was left with questions that haunted my waking hours. Why did these visions feel more real than the sermons I preached? What was it about these experiences that resonated so deeply within my soul? As the days passed, the tension grew heavier on my spirit. I felt like I was straddling two worlds. The one I had always known, shackled by traditions, and another beckoning me towards liberation and awakening. The more I wrestled with my emotions, the clearer it became. The spiritual war. One sensed was not just a conflict within me, but a reflection of the larger struggles we all face. It was as if Jesus, in those visions, was imploring me to see beyond the deception that thrives in our society. An elite class pulling strings from behind the scenes, fomenting division and conflict to maintain control over the masses. My heart raced as I pondered the implications. If I chose to embrace this truth, I knew it would challenge everything I had taught, everything I believed. During one particularly vivid dream, I felt an urgency, a call to action that echoed through my being. It was the realization that I had been a part of a system that often obscures the very essence of spiritual freedom. I saw the world outside my mosque through new eyes. Wars justified by greed and ideology, leaders manipulating faith for their purposes, families torn apart by misinterpretations of Scripture. I understood then that my silence could no longer be my refuge. The awakening happening within me demanded that I share these insights, regardless of the personal cost. Yet, the fear loomed large. What consequences would I face from my community? Would they reject me as a heretic for daring to question the very tenets that had defined my life? Standing before my congregation again, the weight of my revelations pressed heavily on my heart. I tried to speak of love, of unity, but the fear muted my voice. I pondered whether my fellow worshipers could handle the truth that had been revealed to me, the awakening that called for us to rise together against the spiritual war we are all ensnared in. I could feel their expectations wrapping around me, stifling my words even before I attempted to share them. I was torn between my role as a leader and the desire to expose the deception perpetuated in the name of our faith. In the moments of silence that followed my prayer, I knew this was becoming less about me and more about the truth we all need to confront. As my internal struggle reached a breaking point, I felt compelled to relay the urgency of this awakening. There's a profound connection between freedom and truth, a connection that our community desperately needs to explore. The spiritual war isn't just a personal fight. It's a collective journey toward understanding the manipulations that keep us divided. I looked around at the faces before me, feeling a mix of fear and hope. Hope that perhaps I could lead others toward the light I had glimpsed. It was a daunting task, yet imperative, and I steeled myself to confront my fears. In doing so, I would not only seek liberation for my soul, but also lay the groundwork for awakening within my community. As I took a deep breath, preparing to share my experience, I realized the battle was just beginning, and the stakes could not be higher. In a moment of deep meditation, I felt my conscious mind slipping away, as if I was being gently pulled from my body, leaving behind the familiarity of the mosque. Suddenly, I found myself in a barren desert, the sun blazing overhead. The ground was dry and cracked, a wasteland that felt both alien and familiar. There was an overwhelming sense of isolation, yet I felt an inexplicable draw toward a radiant light shimmering on the horizon. As I approached, the light grew brighter, enveloping me in warmth and serenity. It was then that I recognized the figure standing at the center of that illumination, Jesus. He looked at me with compassion, and as I stood before him, I felt both insignificant and profoundly important. Idris, he called my name, and in that instant, the weight of the world fell away. The burdens I had carried, the expectations from my family, my community, and the rigid doctrines I had adhered to, lost their power. Jesus spoke to me about the truth hidden beneath the surface of our religious systems. He revealed how these systems often exploit spiritual seekers, turning faith into a tool of manipulation for the elite. I saw flashes of how organized beliefs could impose chains rather than offer freedom, leaving followers in a state of confusion, struggling to find genuine connection with the divine. I was stunned by the clarity of this revelation, shaking me to the core and challenging everything I had believed. As he continued speaking, the depth of his message resonated within me, igniting a fire that looked to erupt. I was shown the intricacies of a spiritual war that raged on daily, a conflict not only for souls, but for the very hearts and minds of our communities. I witnessed the deceptions perpetuated by those in power, leaders and institutions that profited from the discord among people, promoting division and fear while claiming to offer guidance. It was then I understood. The wars we see splattered across the news are just a reflection of this greater conflict. They serve to distract, to keep us from awakening to the truth that lies buried beneath the surface of our daily lives. With each passing moment in this celestial desert, I became more aware of the implications of this spiritual awakening. Jesus explained that awakening isn't just a personal journey, it's a collective movement, a call for us to reclaim our truth and identity from the shackles of deception. I felt the urgency coursing through me as he articulated the need for us to rise against these oppressive structures. The vision of families torn apart by ideology, neighbors at odds due to manipulated beliefs, it all fell into place. I could feel a deep need to share this message of liberation upon my return to the earthly realm, to spark inspiration in the hearts of those who longed for something more. But as the revelation unfolded, a sense of trepidation crept in. The truth is often met with resistance and scrutiny, and I was acutely aware that sharing these insights could cast me as a pariah among my own people. Would I, Idris, become an outcast for daring to question the very faith I had preached? The fear was tangible, yet the call to action burned brighter than my doubts. Jesus' gaze seemed to prompt me forward, urging me to step beyond the boundaries of fear and embrace the transformative power of truth. It was as if he was inviting me to be a warrior in this spiritual war, not just for myself, but for all those who remained trapped under the weight of dogma. In that luminous desert, a new resolve began to take shape within me. I understood that the path ahead would not be easy. It would be fraught with challenges, obstacles that would test my commitment to the truth. Yet, I also felt a sense of empowerment rise within me, bolstered by Jesus' presence. The awakening that I had experienced was a spark that could ignite a fire in others, a call to break free from the hidden agendas that left us in darkness. As the light around Jesus began to fade, I realized that my journey back to the earthly realm wasn't an end. It was simply the beginning of a much greater crusade. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, ready to embrace the truth, ready to lead others into the light I had seen. As I returned to reality from that transformative experience, the warmth of the desert light faded, but the revelations burned brightly in my soul. I sat back in my humble home, the familiar surroundings now feeling foreign. The weight of what I had seen bore down on me, challenging the very foundation of my beliefs. I was changed, profoundly so, and with that change came a torrent of emotions. I felt both a sense of liberation and overwhelming dread. The truths I carried were heavy, and I knew that voicing them would invite severe repercussions, especially from those I held dear. My heart ached with the knowledge that I might be seen as a traitor to my community and faith. Yet, the urgency to share this awakening gnawed at me. I braced myself for the inevitable backlash when I finally gathered the courage to speak. As I shared my experience during a community gathering, the silence was deafening. I recounted my encounter with Jesus and the powerful insights about the hidden agendas that enslaved our minds. But instead of understanding, I was met with disbelief, anger, and accusations of heresy. Members of my congregation, individuals I had once respected and admired, now looked at me with disdain. They called my beliefs radical and erroneous, branding me a traitor for daring to question the sacred tenets of our faith. The emotional turmoil was suffocating, and I found myself fighting tears. This wasn't just an intellectual debate, it felt like an assault on my very identity. The hardest blow came from my father, the man I had always looked up to. His face twisted with disappointment and rage as he disowned me in front of our community, the words sharp as knives. "You've betrayed your faith," he shouted, his voice echoing my worst fears. Those words rang in my ears long after he had left the gathering, suffocating me with guilt and sorrow. I struggled with feelings of abandonment as I processed the intensity of his rejection. In a flash, I had gone from being a beloved leader to an outcast, simply for embracing a truth that offered a path to genuine freedom. The confusion weighed heavily on me. I was suddenly thrust into a spiritual war, not just within myself, but in the broader context of my life. I grieved not only for the rejection of my beliefs, but also for the familial bonds I had severed under the weight of this truth. I found myself questioning whether my awakening could ever truly lead to understanding and reconciliation, or had I irrevocably altered the fabric of my life, creating a chasm that was impossible to bridge. Each night, I wrestled with nightmares that mirrored the struggle of my waking hours. The tension continued to build as I contemplated my place within the world. As the days turned to weeks, I felt consumed by the urgency to act in this spiritual war. The deception that I had witnessed felt oppressive, tinged with the reality of the suffering around me. I saw despair in the eyes of my community members, anger that drove them apart rather than drawing them closer. I realized that speaking out wasn't just about my awakening, it was about exposing a collective struggle against manipulation and division. How many others were suffering under similar burdens, unaware of the hidden agendas? I felt an unyielding compulsion to reach out, to ignite an awakening in others, even if it meant facing further rejection. I began organizing small gatherings, safe spaces for open dialogue where brave souls could express their doubts and aspirations without fear of backlash. Slowly, I started to weave connections among those yearning for truth, hoping to draw more individuals into the light I had seen. Each encounter brimmed with the possibility of change. People gathered to hear stories of revelation, to share their own experiences. The conversations turned raw as we wrestled with the harsh truths of our world. The wars fueled by greed, the manipulation by those in power, and the technology that kept us tethered to lies. Together, we forged a community bound by the spirit of awakening, determined to challenge the oppression that sought to divide us. Yet, as we delved deeper, I knew the wounds within our community remained raw. The division was palpable, especially between those who embraced my message and those who adhered firmly to their beliefs. I questioned if reconciliation with my father and my roots was possible amid such turmoil. The intensity of this spiritual war was leaving scars that would take time to heal, but as I looked around at the faces of those who sought the truth, I felt hope flickering in the darkness. Perhaps this journey, fraught with pain and struggle, would ultimately lead us to a brighter dawn. The road ahead remained uncertain, but the urgency to awaken grew stronger with each passing day. In the solitude of my room, hidden in the shadows of night, I began an exploration that would change everything. The weight of my revelations after encountering Jesus lingered. I needed to understand the truths I had glimpsed, so I cautiously turned to the Bible. Each page felt like a puzzle piece, clicking into place, illustrating the profound insights I had received. As I read, I felt both invigorated and unsettled. The words came alive, revealing layers of meaning that echoed the messages I had encountered. I had spent years dedicated to my role as an imam, advocating for faith as a path to peace. Yet here I was, questioning the very systems I had upheld. I couldn't shake the feeling that a hidden agenda lurked beneath the surface, manipulating beliefs to maintain control. As my search for truth deepened, I stumbled upon videos of individuals who had undergone similar spiritual awakenings. Their stories resonated with my own. They spoke of encounters with Jesus, of revelations that challenged everything they had known. With every testimonial, I felt a kinship develop. Their experiences mirrored the internal struggle I was grappling with, and reassured me that I wasn't alone in this fight against the spiritual war we were all a part of. They emphasized the importance of seeking knowledge and understanding beyond societal constructs. This was more than just a personal journey. It was a movement striving for collective awakening, and I felt the urgency in their voices. Then one evening, I took the leap and joined a small support group focused on spiritual awakening. The room was modest, filled with flickering candles and warm, inviting faces. It felt like a sanctuary where we could share our stories without judgment. Among this diverse group, I found solace in the shared experience of overcoming struggles born from societal and familial pressures. I listened as people described their journeys, their fears, and how they too had felt the constraints of the elite manipulating their beliefs for ulterior motives. Here, I was no longer the outcast, but rather a seeker among fellow travelers. Each session strengthened my resolve and unveiled layers of healing I had yet to explore. However, amid the comfort of this newfound community, the fear of losing my previous connections loomed large. I still cherished my relationships with my family and fellow congregants, yet every day felt like a tightrope walk. I began to understand how deeply ingrained fear could hold people back from awakening to the truth. The tension was palpable as I navigated these dual worlds. The integrity I felt in pursuing my spiritual journey contrasted sharply with the anxiety of being branded a heretic among my loved ones. Each moment of doubt threatened to derail my commitment to truth, yet the peace I discovered in this support group fortified me. The inner conflict raged, but the flame of awakening burned brightly. As my bonds with the group grew, I felt emboldened to challenge societal norms, just as I had encouraged my congregants to do. We were reminded that the spiritual war was not simply about individual battles. It was a sweeping tide of consciousness that demanded our participation. Together, we spoke of the ways we could share these truths and expose the deceptions that hold us captive. I began to formulate plans to engage with my community, to help others see the manipulations from those who manipulate fear and division. It was a daunting task, and I knew that I would face further backlash, but the knowledge that I wasn't alone propelled me forward. With each passing day, the awakening within me intensified, igniting a desire to confront not just the systems of control but also my own fears. As my thoughts expanded, so did my understanding of the deeper connections between spirituality and the socio-political dynamics at play. I questioned how the technology we embraced, often heralded as a tool for connection, could also function as a mechanism of deception, fueling divisiveness and isolating individuals. My journey was about more than just personal liberation. It was a clarion call for collective awakening against the backdrop of manipulation. And with that sense of urgency, I prepared for the next steps, knowing full well that the battle for truth would require unwavering courage as I chose to stand against the darkness in pursuit of the light. As I grappled with the aftermath of my encounter with Jesus, the realization settled in that my experience served a greater purpose than I had initially understood. The warmth of his presence lingered within me, igniting a flame of conviction that demanded to be shared. I had felt the depths of spiritual truth, the revelation of deception that had clouded my understanding for so long. The weight of what I had learned became a burden I could not keep to myself, despite knowing the potential costs to my life and relationships. It was clear. The truth of spiritual freedom through Jesus was a calling, and ignoring it was no longer an option. The mosque, once my sanctuary, began to feel like a prison. In sharing my awakening, I envisioned liberation for others, not just for myself. The spiritual war one had encountered wasn't just personal. It was a collective struggle against an oppressive hidden agenda that enslaved our hearts and minds. I felt compelled to uproot the fear-based doctrines that had kept us in submission, feedings, wars that divided families, and power structures that benefited only a select few. The thought of these realizations being brushed aside for the sake of conformity fueled my sense of urgency. I watched my fellow worshippers move through life as puppets, unaware of the strings that held them captive. I envisioned a movement that could wake them up, but how could I be the one to ignite that spark? I spent sleepless nights wrestling with my thoughts. Each moment passed in a haze of anxiety and inspiration, pushing me to prepare for the inevitable conversations that lay ahead. I knew I would be met with resistance from those who felt threatened by new ideas, especially from leaders within my community who had long guarded their authority. Yet, I also saw hope, a chance to help others discover the truth I had come to embrace, a truth that pointed towards liberation and awakening. In my heart, I remembered the faces of those who had long sought clarity. who had wandered through the fog of their own confusion. They were waiting for someone to stand up and speak. Finally, I reached out to my small support group, a collective of souls who shared my struggles and desires. Together, we began organizing gatherings to share our experiences and insights. With every meeting, our numbers grew, and I felt a buoyancy in the air. More people began to resonate with the message of awakening, a message that urged us to confront the deception that threatened our collective spirit. As conversations deepened, the tension transformed into empowerment. We tackled uncomfortable truths, explored the manipulation wielded by societal elites, and encouraged one another to break free from the chains of ignorance. I felt the energy in the room shift as we collectively embraced the responsibility to guide those still lost in the shadows. Yet, even as the community grew and hope began to flourish, doubts clawed at the edges of my mind. I was still acutely aware of the sacrifices I faced in sharing this truth. Friends who would turn away, family who may never understand, and the weight of being labeled a heretic. My father's disownment still echoed painfully through my heart. His words lingered as a haunting reminder of the familial love I risked losing. The emotional toll weighed heavily, but I felt Jesus' presence reaffirming my path. Each time I recalled our encounter, the light in his eyes pushed me forward with renewed strength, urging me to transcend my fears and doubts. The stakes felt impossibly high as I prepared to engage with my community. Each prayer and reflection heightened my desire to reach out, to face the potential backlash that awaited me. I envisioned speaking from the pulpit, laying bare my transformation, and urging others to embrace their own journeys toward truth. Would they listen? Would they too feel the pull of awakening? I stood at the precipice, poised to dive into a spiritual war that could either liberate or consume me. The urgency I felt was palpable, the desire to illuminate the darkness around us intense. As I carefully selected my words, I braced myself for the confrontation ahead, knowing that the truth we seek is often born from the struggle and conflict we dare to acknowledge. Determined to break my silence, I realized that the time had come for me to step out from the shadows. Leaving my home felt like both an act of defiance and a means of finding clarity. I stepped into the early morning light, the air crisp against my skin as I took a deep breath and absorbed my surroundings. This journey wasn't just a stroll. It was a commitment to embrace the transformation I had undergone after encountering Jesus. I was no longer going to hide the revelation that had stirred my soul, nor would I allow fear to silence the truth that needed to be spoken. My heart raced as I contemplated the impact of my journey on my life and the lives of others around me. As I ventured further from the comforts of my home, the weight of my decision began to settle in. It wasn't just the act of departing. It was about what lay ahead, sharing my message with the world, particularly with those who, like me, were grappling with uncertainty and spiritual hunger. I had witnessed the hidden agendas that manipulate our beliefs, and I felt a strong calling to help others awaken to the deceptions that held them captive. I envisioned standing before a group, sharing the compelling truth that had ignited a fire within me. The warmth spread through my chest, a reminder of the spiritual war that I was eager to arm others against. With each step, memories of that fateful encounter replayed in my mind. The brilliant light, the compassion of Jesus, and the profound insights he had shared with me. The image of his face haunted my thoughts, urging me forward into the unknown. I remembered the way he exposed the corruption and manipulation at the heart of our society, the elite who thrived on division, the spiritual deceivers who cloaked themselves in authority. This was why I needed to speak out. It was a charge that pierced deep into my very being. I thought of the many families broken by conflict, the friendships wrecked by misunderstanding, and the fear that kept us from unity. Each of those emotions weighed heavily on my shoulders, and through them I found the strength to pursue this path. As I approached a community center that often held gatherings, the familiar place felt different this time, filled with potential yet laced with anxiety about how my message would be received. I paused, steadying my breath as I fought against the fear that threatened to creep in. What if they dismissed me? What if my own had turned against me? Yet I recalled Jesus' teachings about courage in the face of adversity. This gathering was not just about me, it was about awakening those around me who were yearning for truth. I envisioned their faces lighting up with recognition, as they too connected to the reality beneath the surface of their beliefs. With each heartbeat, the urgency compelled me to move forward. I imagined introducing my experience, sharing the revelations that had shocked me to my core. I thought of the sacred bonds we could form as we confronted our shared struggles, the societal manipulation, the political deception, and the wars that raged around us, all aimed at keeping us from awakening. The anticipation was palpable. The vision of standing up, looking into the eyes of others, ignited a sense of hope that burned fiercely within me. In that moment, I promised myself that I would not allow my fears to define me. I would offer my truth and hope it ignited the same courage in others. As I entered the room, I felt a mix of apprehension and empowerment. I was stepping into a spiritual war, not just for myself, but for those yearning for liberation from chains they might not even see. I was prepared to share all that Jesus had revealed to me, because the stakes had never felt higher. The truth that I had glimpsed could help others reclaim their lives, helping them confront their deceptions and the societal structures they had been conditioned to accept. I knew my journey toward awakening would not be easy and would come with challenges, but the spark inside me reaffirmed that it was essential. I took a deep breath, ready to embrace whatever came next, committed to fighting not just for my truth, but for the collective awakening of all seeking souls. Embracing my mission after my encounter with Jesus felt like stepping into a new world, one illuminated by the truth that I had long sought. But this newfound freedom was fraught with challenges that weighed heavily on my heart. The exhilaration of awakening was often eclipsed by the weight of responsibility. I was now keenly aware of the deception that permeated our society, forced to reckon with the hidden agendas that kept people from recognizing their own truths. My journey was no longer just a personal exploration. It had transformed into a quest to help others navigate the spiritual war surrounding us. Every day became a balancing act between sharing my insights and shielding myself from the backlash that came with challenging the status quo. The first time I shared my revelations with a friend, I felt an anxious lump in my throat. I spoke of the manipulative elite who thrive on division, their insidious tactics that create conflict in our communities. I recounted to her the deep sense of peace I had experienced in the presence of Jesus, how his love and compassion were palpable, and how he urged me to awaken others. I could see my friend listening intently, but the tightening in her expression told me she was grappling with fear. I knew this fear was part of the deception that held many captive, a reluctance to confront uncomfortable truths. Each conversation became a delicate dance, as I cautiously sought to plant the seeds of awakening in the minds of those around me, all while wrestling with my own insecurities. As I navigated this new reality, I realized that my liberation came with an overwhelming sense of purpose. I began organizing gatherings, safe spaces for individuals seeking truth where we could engage in open dialogues about faith, deception, and the realities of our world. The first gathering was small, and the energy in the room was thick with anticipation. As I shared my journey, the vulnerability washed over me like a wave. I spoke of witnessing the spiritual war that raged around us. The wars born of greed and manipulation, and how these forces kept us divided. Their faces reflected a mix of disbelief and intrigue, but I knew that each question they posed meant they were beginning to awaken to their own truths. With each passing meeting, more people joined us, drawn by a shared desire for understanding. It was inspiring to see others confront their fears as they began to reconcile their spiritual journeys. We discussed how technology, once viewed as a tool for connection, often served to perpetuate deception, maintaining the control of those who manipulate the narrative. The urgency to reach more individuals grew, a fire kindling in my heart. Each soul that opened up further illuminated the path ahead of us, giving clarity to the overwhelming need to resist the spiritual war we were ensnared in. Despite the camaraderie and hope that blossomed within our group, the shadows of fear never truly dissipated. I remained acutely aware of the risks. Friends and family had already distanced themselves from me as they perceived my awakening as a threat. My father's disapproval echoed in my mind, a constant reminder that for every individual who found freedom, there were others standing rigidly by the beliefs they had always known. The internal struggle deepened as I questioned whether I could truly effect change without losing what little connections remained intact. Yet the truth I had encountered called to me insistently, urging me to push through the resistance, to embrace the higher purpose of my journey, and to share the awakening that had transformed my life. The battle for the truth was just beginning, and each step forward demanded unwavering courage as I prepared to confront the darkness with the light I now held within. Years have passed since I embraced the truth that transformed my life, and in that time I've thrived within a supportive community, one that nurtures and champions awakening. Each day I wake up with a sense of purpose, a conviction to share my testimony with others who yearn for spiritual liberation. This community has become my lifeline, a place where I feel understood and valued for my journey. We gather, exchanging stories of our struggles and revelations, creating a safe space to confront the spiritual war that exists within and around us. Together, we delve into the depths of truth that Jesus revealed to me, illuminating paths I had never considered, paths leading us away from the hidden agendas of those in power and toward an authentic understanding of faith. As I share my story of encountering Jesus, I find the power of my experience resonates deeply with others. I speak of the revelation I had about the manipulation and deception that flow through our systems, the ways that the elite perpetuate division through fear. In recounting my journey, I highlight not just the struggles, but the incredible peace that follows when one embraces truth. Each word carries the weight of my pain, the conflict I endured with my family, and the hope I carry for reconciliation. It is a bitter reminder of what was lost, yet I hold tightly to the belief that truth can bridge even the deepest chasms. This feeling fuels my desire to foster connection and understanding, not just within my new community but beyond it, to those who may still be ensnared by the ties of traditional beliefs that no longer serve them. Despite the warmth of my new family, a sense of longing persists. I often think about my father and the gap that remains between us. I remember the pain in his voice when he disowned me, branding me a traitor. That moment of rejection is a deep wound that hasn't fully healed. Yet underneath that pain lies an unwavering hope that one day we might reconnect, that he may see the light that Jesus instilled in me. The emotional turmoil of separation lingers, but it also motivates me to be an example of love and understanding, a living testimony of transformation. I believe that by embodying the truth I have discovered, I may someday show him how awakening can lead to compassion rather than division. As I interact with those around me and advocate for awakening, I remain acutely aware of the societal pressures that exist. There are moments when I can see the fear in their eyes when discussing topics that challenge the status quo. It's disheartening to recognize how deeply ingrained the deception is, how easily people cling to narratives that maintain their comfort. I often remind them that confronting these uncomfortable truths is part of the spiritual war we face. It's about challenging the narrative laid out before us. I share stories of profound change, the miraculous ways in which embracing the truth can lead to liberation from societal chains. My goal is to inspire courage in others, encouraging them to question the hidden agendas that control our lives, and to stand up against the deceptions we've been taught to accept. In those moments of sharing, as I see the flicker of understanding ignite in their eyes, I know that I'm planting seeds of hope for futures where love transcends fear. Every conversation is an opportunity for awakening, and every new soul touched by this message serves as a reminder of why I embarked on this journey. I want to encourage others to wrestle with their beliefs, reclaim their power, and ultimately challenge the fear that keeps us divided. This spiritual war may be daunting, but I gather strength knowing that the truth I hold can set not only me but also my community free. As I look at the faces of those I'm inspiring, I can't help but feel that this path is just the beginning, a prelude to a larger movement awaiting to unfold as I continue to share my story, and in the hope of guiding others toward the light I've been blessed to witness. Now that you've journeyed with me through this transformation, I want to leave you with a thought that echoes deep within my soul. Have you ever stood at the crossroads of belief, facing the dense fog of confusion amidst the glaring light of truth? We live in a world tangled in hidden agendas, a world where the elite maneuver through shadows, wielding fear to keep us divided. But in this chaos, there is an awakening, a call to rise, to reclaim our spiritual truths. My encounter with Jesus was more than a personal revelation. It awakened a profound understanding of a spiritual war that rages both inside and outside us. I am here to tell you that this battle is not just for my soul or yours, it's for the very essence of our humanity. It beckons us to shed the chains of dogma that ensnare us, and to embrace the radical truth that offers freedom, connection, and love. So I turn to you now. Have you ever felt a yearning deep within to break free from the confines of expectation? I invite you to share your experience in the comments below. You are not alone in this quest for understanding. Your voice matters in the unfolding of this collective awakening. Together, we can spark conversations that illuminate the hidden truths around us. If this message speaks to your heart, and you're ready to embark on a journey of discovery, don't forget to subscribe to Truth from Beyond and hit that notification bell. By becoming part of this community, you are taking a stand, not just for yourself, but for everyone who craves the light of truth. What we'll explore next will delve even deeper into this spiritual adventure, one you won't want to miss. Thank you for allowing me to share my story with you. I'm Idris. Remember, as we walk this path together, the truth has a way of revealing itself to those brave enough to seek it. Until next time, may you find peace in your pursuit of understanding.